The summer sun beats down mercilessly upon the limestone walls of Jerusalem in the year 70 of the Common Era. Smoke billows from the lower city, obscuring the view of the magnificent Temple Mount that dominates the skyline. Thousands of Roman legionaries stand in formation, their armor glinting ominously amidst the dust and chaos of the siege. Inside the walls, the defenders of Judea grip their weapons with exhausted determination, knowing that the final hour has arrived. The air is thick with the scent of burning cedar and the terrified cries of a starving population trapped within the holy city. This is the climax of a conflict that has raged for 4 bloody years and threatens to extinguish a nation. At stake is more than just political control over a troublesome province on the eastern fringe of the Roman Empire. The survival of the Jewish religion and the sanctity of the Second Temple hang in the balance against the crushing might of the Roman war machine. For the Romans, victory means restoring honor and securing the legitimacy of a new imperial dynasty led by Vespasian and his son Titus. For the Jewish rebels, defeat implies the total annihilation of their spiritual center and the enslavement of their people. The tension is palpable as the battering rams thunder against the ancient fortifications, shaking the very foundations of the earth. General Titus stands atop a ridge on Mount Scopus, surveying the beleaguered city with a mixture of admiration and ruthless calculation. He is the son of the emperor and a seasoned commander charged with ending this rebellion once and for all. Titus is a man of pragmatism who initially hoped to preserve the magnificent temple as a trophy of Rome, but his patience has worn thin after months of fierce resistance. He wears the ornate muscle cuirass of a Roman general and a crimson cloak that billows in the hot wind. His gaze is fixed on the Antonia fortress, the strategic key to breaching the temple complex. How did it come to this desperate point where the cradle of monotheism faces total destruction by the greatest superpower of the ancient world? What drove the people of Judea to rise up against the invincible legions of Rome, not once but 3 separate times over the course of 70 years? The answer lies in a volatile mix of religious zeal mismanagement by corrupt procurators and the unyielding desire for freedom. To understand the catastrophe of the year 70, we must look back at the decades of friction that ignited the flames of war across the Holy Land. The relationship between Rome and Judea began with a diplomatic alliance but slowly curdled into oppression after the Roman general Pompey the Great intervened in a civil war in 63 before the Common Era. By the 1st century, the region was a powder keg of resentment. Roman governors displayed a profound lack of understanding for Jewish customs, often sparking riots through insensitivity or greed. They demanded heavy taxes and placed Roman eagles in holy places, which the local population viewed as idolatry. This cultural chasm created an environment where radical groups could flourish and preach that submission to Rome was a sin against God. Herod the Great had managed to keep the peace through a combination of brutal suppression and grand building projects, including the expansion of the Second Temple. However, after his death, the province fell under direct Roman administration. The procurators sent from Rome were often second-rate administrators looking to enrich themselves. Pontius Pilate and his successors frequently clashed with the Jewish populace over the use of temple funds for secular projects like aqueducts. Every act of disrespect toward the temple served to radicalize the population and strengthen the zealots who advocated for armed resistance. The situation deteriorated further under the reign of Emperor Caligula, who ordered a statue of himself to be placed within the Holy of Holies. Although his death prevented this sacrilege, the mere threat convinced many Jews that Rome was determined to destroy their faith. By the 50s and 60s of the Common Era, social banditry was rampant. The Sicarii or dagger men began assassinating Roman collaborators in broad daylight, spreading terror and chaos. The divide between the wealthy pro-Roman aristocracy and the impoverished religious peasantry grew wider every day, creating the conditions for a massive social explosion. The spark finally ignited in the year 66 in the coastal city of Caesarea Maritima. A dispute between Greeks and Jews over a synagogue was mishandled by the procurator Gessius Florus, who responded by seizing silver from the temple treasury in Jerusalem. When the people mocked him, Florus unleashed his troops on the city, resulting in a massacre. This was the breaking point. The captain of the temple guard stopped the daily sacrifices for the welfare of the Roman emperor, effectively declaring open war. The moderate voices calling for peace were silenced by the roar of the angry mob. The Roman governor of Syria, Cestius Gallus, marched south with the 12th Legion to restore order, expecting a quick victory against a disorganized rabble. He reached Jerusalem and even breached the suburbs, but inexplicably decided to withdraw as winter approached. This retreat proved fatal. The Jewish rebels pursued the retreating column and ambushed them at the pass of Beit Horon. In a stunning upset, the rebels annihilated the 12th Legion, capturing their eagle standard and heavy siege engines. The victory intoxicated the rebels, convincing them that God was fighting on their side, just as he had in the days of the Maccabees. News of the defeat shocked the Roman world. Emperor Nero realized this was no minor disturbance, but a full-scale war. He dispatched his most capable general, Vespasian, along with his son Titus, to crush the revolt. Vespasian arrived in the year 67 with 60,000 highly trained soldiers. His strategy was methodical and brutal. He decided to subdue the Galilee first to cut off support for Jerusalem. He moved from town to town, obliterating resistance and enslaving the population. The rebellion in the north was led by a young commander named Joseph ben Mattatyahu. Joseph ben Mattatyahu attempted to defend the fortress of Jotapata for 47 days against the Roman onslaught. The siege was gruesome, with the Romans using the very artillery captured at Beit Horon against the defenders. When the walls finally fell, Joseph and 40 survivors hid in a cave. They agreed to a suicide pact rather than face capture, but Joseph managed to manipulate the lots so that he was the last man standing. He surrendered to Vespasian and prophesied that the general would one day become emperor. This former rebel commander would become known to history as Flavius Josephus, the primary historian of the war. With Galilee subdued, Vespasian began to encircle Jerusalem, slowly squeezing the life out of the rebellion. However, events in Rome paused the campaign. Nero committed suicide, plunging the empire into the chaotic year of the four emperors. In the year 69, Vespasian was declared emperor by his troops, fulfilling Josephus's prophecy. He departed for Rome to secure his throne, leaving Titus in charge of the final siege of Jerusalem. Inside the city, the situation was a nightmare. Instead of preparing for the siege, rival rebel factions fought a bloody civil war against each other, burning the food stores in a mad attempt to force the people to fight. Titus arrived at Jerusalem in the spring of the year 70, just before Passover, trapping hundreds of thousands of pilgrims inside the city. He set up his camps and began the construction of a siege wall to starve the defenders. The Romans used their engineering prowess to build massive earthworks and towers. The defenders fought with desperate courage, launching sorties to burn the Roman siege engines. But hunger began to take its toll. Josephus describes horrific scenes of starvation where leather belts and shoes were eaten and the bonds of humanity completely dissolved. The Romans breached the first and second walls with their battering rams, forcing the defenders back to the Temple Mount and the Antonia fortress. The fighting was hand-to-hand and incredibly savage. The Romans were fueled by a desire for vengeance, while the rebels believed that God would intervene at the last moment to save his sanctuary. Titus ordered the Antonia fortress to be leveled to provide a platform for his soldiers to assault the temple itself. The daily sacrifices ceased, and the mood in the city turned to apocalyptic despair. On the 9th day of the month of Av, a day already marked by tragedy in Jewish history, the end finally came. According to Josephus, a Roman soldier acting without orders threw a burning brand into a chamber of the temple. The dry cedar wood caught fire instantly. Titus reportedly tried to extinguish the flames, wishing to preserve the structure, but his soldiers were in a frenzy. They slaughtered everyone in their path and looted the treasury. As the fire raged, the gold melted and ran down the stone steps. The magnificent Second Temple, the center of Jewish life for nearly 600 years, crashed down in ruins. The destruction was absolute. The Romans tore down the walls of the temple and the city, leaving only a few towers to demonstrate the strength of the fortifications they had overcome. Thousands of prisoners were sent to the mines in Egypt or to die in the gladiatorial arenas of the empire. The sacred vessels of the temple, including the menorah and the table of showbread, were carried to Rome in a triumphal procession. This scene is immortalized on the Arch of Titus, which still stands in Rome today, a stone testimony to the looting of Jerusalem. Although Jerusalem had fallen, resistance continued in a few remote fortresses. The most famous of these was Masada, a plateau fortification overlooking the Dead Sea. A group of Sicarii held out there for 3 years against the 10th Legion. The Romans built a massive siege ramp to reach the summit. In the year 73, when the Romans finally breached the wall, they found silence. The defenders had chosen to take their own lives rather than submit to Roman slavery. The fall of Masada marked the bloody end of the First Jewish-Roman War. Judea lay in ruins, but the spirit of resistance was not entirely extinguished. A period of uneasy quiet followed as the Jewish people grappled with the loss of the temple. The center of religious life began to shift from the sacrificial cult of the priests to the study of Torah by the rabbis. A new academy was established at Yavne, ensuring that Judaism would survive without a central sanctuary. However, the underlying tensions with Rome remained unresolved. The Roman tax specifically for Jews was humiliating, and the dream of independence flickered in the hearts of the diaspora. The next major eruption of violence occurred in the year 115, known as the Kitos War. Unlike the First Revolt, this conflict began in the Jewish diaspora communities of Cyrene, Egypt, and Cyprus, while the Emperor Trajan was distracted by his campaign against the Parthian Empire. What started as tensions between Jewish and Greek neighbors exploded into a widespread rebellion that devastated entire provinces. The rebels in Cyrene destroyed pagan temples and attacked Roman garrisons, causing massive casualties. The violence spread to Egypt, threatening the grain supply of Rome. Emperor Trajan was forced to divert his best general, Lucius Quietus, to crush the uprising. The response was merciless. In Alexandria, the great synagogue was destroyed, and the Jewish community was decimated. In Cyprus, the fighting was so brutal that Jews were banned from setting foot on the island for centuries under pain of death. The Kitos War is often overshadowed by the revolts in Judea, but it was a massive conflict that spanned the eastern Mediterranean. It left the Jewish communities of the diaspora shattered and set the stage for the final confrontation in the Holy Land. In the year 117, Hadrian became emperor. Initially, there was hope among the Jews that he would be a benevolent ruler. Hadrian was a Philhellene, a lover of Greek culture, and at first he seemed respectful of other traditions. Rumors even circulated that he might allow the rebuilding of the temple. However, these hopes were quickly dashed. Hadrian planned to rebuild Jerusalem not as a Jewish holy city, but as a pagan metropolis named Aelia Capitolina, dedicated to Jupiter. He also outlawed key Jewish practices, such as circumcision, viewing them as barbaric mutilation. This cultural attack was the catalyst for the Third Jewish-Roman War, also known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt, which erupted in the year 132. This revolt was different from the chaotic factionalism of the First War. The rebels were united under a single charismatic leader named Simon Bar Kokhba. He was a military genius who organized a disciplined army. The prominent Rabbi Akiva hailed him as the Messiah, believing he would restore the kingdom of Israel. This messianic fervor galvanized the population and united the religious and military leadership. Bar Kokhba avoided the mistake of holding up in fortified cities where the Romans could use their siege engines. Instead, he waged a guerrilla war using a vast network of underground hideouts and tunnels. The rebels struck Roman patrols quickly and then vanished into the earth. They seized control of Judea and even established an independent administration, minting coins with slogans like "For the Freedom of Jerusalem." For 2 years, the Romans suffered humiliating defeats. An entire Roman legion, the 22nd Dietariana, may have been completely destroyed during this time. Emperor Hadrian was furious and alarmed. He summoned his best general Julius Severus all the way from Britain to handle the crisis. Severus recognized that he could not defeat the rebels in open battle, so he adopted a scorched earth policy. He moved slowly and methodically, isolating rebel groups and starving them out. He refused to engage in large-scale battles, preferring to hunt down the insurgents cave by cave. The Roman war machine ground forward, destroying villages and burning crops, systematically dismantling the infrastructure of Judea. The war culminated in the siege of Beit the last stronghold of Bar Kokhba, located southwest of Jerusalem. In the year 135, the Romans surrounded the fortress. Inside, the conditions were desperate. The defenders were packed together with dwindling supplies. The Romans built a circumvallation wall to prevent escape. Legend says that the Romans finally breached the defenses on the 9th of Av, the same date the first and second temples were destroyed. The slaughter at Beit was immense. Simon Bar Kokhba was killed, and the dream of Jewish independence was crushed. The aftermath of the Bar Kokhba Revolt was catastrophic. The Roman historian Cassius Dio reported that 580,000 Jews were killed in the fighting, and countless more died of hunger and disease. 985 villages were razed to the ground. Judea was left desolate. Hadrian was determined to erase the Jewish connection to the land permanently. He renamed the province Syria Palestina, reviving the name of the ancient Philistines, the biblical enemies of the Israelites. He forbade Jews from entering Jerusalem, except on one day a year to mourn. Hadrian also unleashed a campaign of religious persecution. He banned the teaching of the Torah, the observance of the Sabbath, and the ordination of rabbis. This period is remembered in Jewish tradition as the era of the 10 martyrs, prominent rabbis, including Akiva, who were tortured and executed for defying the Roman decrees. Akiva was flayed alive with iron combs, yet he recited the Shema prayer with his dying breath. These martyrdoms became central to Jewish liturgy, symbolizing the ultimate sacrifice for faith. Despite the devastation, the Jewish people did not disappear. The center of Jewish life shifted north to the Galilee, where the Sanhedrin reassembled. The rabbis worked feverishly to codify the oral law, ensuring that the traditions would not be lost. The Mishnah was compiled during this period, serving as the foundation for the Talmud. This intellectual and spiritual fortress proved stronger than any stone wall. It allowed Judaism to transcend its geographical boundaries and survive as a portable religion centered on study, prayer, and community rather than temple sacrifice. The destruction of the Second Temple and the failure of the revolts fundamentally changed the nature of Judaism. The role of the priest was replaced by the rabbi. The altar was replaced by the synagogue. The sacrifices were replaced by the service of the heart. This transformation allowed the Jewish people to endure nearly 2,000 years of exile. The Romans believed they had solved the Jewish problem by scattering the people and renaming the land, but they had inadvertently spurred the evolution of a faith that would outlast the Roman Empire itself. Today, the Arch of Titus still stands in Rome, but the empire it celebrates is long gone. In contrast, the descendants of the rebels who fought in Jerusalem and Beit continue to study the texts preserved by the rabbis of the Galilee. The western wall, a retaining wall of the Temple Mount, remains the holiest site where Jews can pray. It stands as a silent witness to the destruction and a symbol of endurance. The Jewish-Roman wars were a tragedy of epic proportions, but they are also a testament to the resilience of a people who refused to be erased from history.